7 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few running backs I would bench this week. The first guy, Miles Sanders of the Philadelphia Eagles. So Miles Sanders, he's been struggling mightily this season here with this Eagle team, with only 2 double-digit fantasy days out of the first 6 games of the season in PPR leagues. So right here, he was taken in the 3rd or 4th round of most fantasy drafts. And the Eagles, they just don't use him a lot this season, and especially at the goal line, it's a lot of QB option runs with Jalen Hurts so far this year. And Miles Sanders this week on paper, it's a decent matchup at the Vegas Raiders. But even with all the buys and stuff, I just can't trust Myles Sanders. He's not doing much. He's not getting many carries. He don't catch the ball out of the backfield really. And he's just a player here that you just can't trust so far this season. So right here, I wouldn't drop Sanders, but I definitely would bench him this week and go win another option at the running back position. The second running back, C.Y. Mitchell of the San Francisco 49ers. So that backfield, in my opinion, over there in San Francisco is an unknown thing. We know Raheem Mostert's out for the season. We know in week 1, Mitchell, when he filled in for Mostert, looked really good. And we know week 5 at Arizona, he got most of the touches, even though he only touched the ball 11 times in that game, with Trey Sermon only getting 1 or 2 touches. But I think coming out of the bye here, we might see more Trey Sermon and a 50-50 split with Mitchell and Sermon. So right here with the unknown going on over there in San Francisco at the running back position, and the matchup being tough at paper with the Colts giving up the 4th least amount of fantasy points to running backs, I think this week it's safe to bench Mitchell and keep him on your bench and see what happens in that backfield. The next running back I would bench this week is Michael Carter of the New York Jets. So Carter had 2 good ball games right before the bye week in week 6. Week 4 versus Tennessee, 13 carries, 38 yards, a touchdown and a catch for -4 yards. And week 5 at Atlanta and London, 10 carries, 38 yards, a touchdown, and he added 3 catches for 20 yards. So right here, week 6, they had the byes, the Jets. And week 7, pretty tough matchup at the New England Patriots here. And the Patriots in week 2, they put the Jets down early and often in that game. And I think once again in this one, the Jets are going to be one-dimensional. They're going to have to throw the football a lot. Is Zach Wilson, the rookie quarterback for this Jet offense? Because I think the Patriots get off to a good start in this one and might abandon the run. I know Michael Carter is a decent receiver out of the backfield, but I just don't see him being a good factor this week. The next running back I would bench this week is Jamaal Williams of the Detroit Lions. I mentioned Jamaal Williams as a drop candidate this week off your fantasy team, and he got dropped in 7% of fantasy leagues this week, but he's still only in 69% of fantasy leagues. So the last couple weeks here, his workload's gone down, is Jamaal Williams. And right here, DeAndre Swift's the number 1 over there. And like I mentioned, Swift's getting more touches. He's being more productive. And last week in week 6, he only had 5 touches in that ball game as Williams. And here in week 7, it's a tough matchup at the Los Angeles Rams. Rams, in my opinion, get off to a 10 to 14 point lead here versus the Detroit Lions. And then it's going to spell trouble for this Lion offense and Jamaal Williams, who they're not really using much as a pass catcher out of the backfield like they are in DeAndre Swift. So right here, I don't see Williams having a great game. I think anywhere from 5 to 8 fantasy points, but that's obviously not going to get the job done. And he's a running back I would bench this week, and the 5th and final running back I would bench this week is Myles Gaskin, Miami Dolphins. So Myles Gaskin, he was slumping the whole season pretty much until week 5. He had that huge game versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 5 rushes, 25 yards, but caught 10 balls for 74 yards and 2 touchdowns. But right here in week 6, he got banged up in London versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. And he only finished in that game 5 carries, 9 yards, and 2 catches for 5 yards. So that game in week 5 versus Tampa Bay was a fluke, in my opinion, where he caught 10 passes, which he's not going to do again this season. I know it's a decent matchup once again on paper for Gaskin and the Dolphins versus the Atlanta Falcons, who give up the 8th most fantasy points to running backs this season, but I don't think he's going to have a good game in this one. And if you got better options, bench him. So that's a few running backs I would bench here in week 7 of the fantasy football season.